Elliot here with the St. Paul Music Collective. We're talking to Emma Orfield from Orfield Laboratories. How you doing, Emma?
I'm good, Elliot. Welcome to Orfield Labs. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for showing us around.
Yeah, my pleasure. Why don't you come into Studio One?
Thank you.
So this building was constructed in 1970 as a premier recording studio in the Midwest. It was called Sound 80. And 3M at the time had invented multi-track digital recording. And they said to Sound 80, they said, we'd like you to become our exemplar recording studio. So in addition to the Guinness World Record that we have for the quietest place on earth, we've actually since certified as the world's first digital recording studio. So 2 of the studios we've maintained, they're historically correct. This is Studio One. So this is a space in which Blood on the Tracks was recorded. This is the space in which Cat Stevens recorded his last American album. The stories I've been told is that Cat Stevens came in with Persian rugs and a curry chef and incense.
Sounds right.
And around that time, Prince was actually across the hall recording the demos that landed him the contract with the Warner Brothers.
Cool. I wonder what those two had to say to each other. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. One wonders. But this space, we don't do any recording nowadays. And so this space we use for seminars, we use them for conferences, we do a lot of educational work. And it's really a flexible space to be used as the biggest room in the building. And so lots of gatherings in here. As you can see, we have lots of artwork as well. So everything beyond the artwork and beyond our instrumentation is as it was in 1970. So this room is completely historically correct. The artwork is all ours. This piece over here is by a Canadian Ojibwe artist named Carl Beam. So Carl was from up in the Manitoulin Islands in northern Canada, and he was considered the father of modern Native American art. And he was actually the first Native artist to be collected by the National Gallery in Ottawa. So this piece is called The Big Dissolve. It's from a series of his called The Whale of Our Being, which we own about half of. And this piece over here as well is also from that series. So Carl was a friend of our family's, which led to us purchasing a lot of his artwork. And he died about 20 years ago. And actually, when he died, we ended up commissioning his daughter to do an allegory of him, and that's this piece over here. So her name is Anang Beam. She was trained in Asia. Her work is much more complicated, much more colorful than her father's, and actually her mother's as well, who was also an artist. And so this is something I would call, and that she would call, a grief piece. She did this not long after Carl's death.
Has a lot of aspects of her debt in his work?
Yeah, so this is Carl in the middle, and he's surrounded by everything that she felt represented him in his career. You have the whale over here. So the series that I mentioned, that those pieces are from, The Whale of Our Being. To the Ojibwe, the whale, we've been told, is a metaphor for the universe. That's how Carl explained it. So the space is really, it's really embellished by lots of artwork, our entire building. My grandfather has been collecting art since he was about 12 years old. He went to New York with his family, and they all went to the Statue of Liberty, and he went to MoMA. And so that's been a big part of his life, has been collecting work, and it's been a big piece of the experience of those that come and visit our space here as well.
Cool. I like how you guys blend the science and the art kind of stuff.
Yes, yeah, we think that science and art and mysticism and all of the things should inform one another.
Be connected, sure.
Be connected.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be different religions.
We like all of it.
Got it.
All are welcome. But all of the other things in this space, so it's a combination of instrumentation. These over here are binaural recording torsos. This over here is a Norwegian company makes a device called an acoustic camera. The company is Norsonic. This visualizes sound.
Like you'd see in Pro Tools.
Yeah.
Just kind of the waves.
Yeah, you basically see, it's almost like an aura. So there's 128 microphones and a camera in the center. And so when you point this disc at something and you use the device, it will visualize the sound that's picked up in the environment. And so we use this in our product testing work. We also use it in our architectural work. It has broad applications. But the ability to visualize sound is quite a new technology.
Sure.
And we were the first accredited lab in the country to have this device. So we specialize in building performance. And building performance is about measuring what's going on in the environment.
Sure.
And that's much more common in Europe and much more common in Asia. In the US, it's much more common to guess what's going on in a space and then treat based on that intuition. And oftentimes that intuition is wrong. So we find that with science and with measurement, which we spend a lot of our money on measurement gear, we're able to understand exactly what's going on in the environment and then treat based off of that knowledge. So that goes for our acoustic work, but it also goes for our work in all of the other perceptual modalities. So we have devices that measure acoustics, lighting, daylighting, thermal comfort, indoor air quality. We measure across all of the perceptual domains.
Sure.
Yeah. So I mentioned the equipment, I mentioned the measurement devices because of how unusual it is for a design and research lab, not just to be working across all of the senses, but to be measuring across them as well.
Okay, in any way you can, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so, and we'll talk, a bit more about this, later in the introduction, but we're a multisensory design and research firm. So our specialty is in human perception. And our work is based off of the reality that we're never living single sensory experiences. So it's very common in the US for people to be taught to go into single tracks. I'm going to go and I'm going to learn to be a lighting designer, or I'm going to go and learn to measure in lighting. I'm going to go and learn to design acoustics or to measure in acoustics, and so on and so forth. What we've found is everything is extremely connected. Because if you design a space to be acoustically quiet, but it's visually chaotic.
And it smells horrible.
And it smells horrible, you don't have a quiet room.
Sure.
If you design a space that's acoustically very quiet, visually very quiet but cold, again, you're not in a quiet room, you're in a cold room. So we work across all the domains because all the domains are what we're dealing with in the real world.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, cool. And that's based off of mostly like just things that bug people, more or less, right? Like you were saying, if it's too cold, if it's smelly, if it's so if you erase all those negatives, it tends to be just more of a positive experience.
Exactly. Yeah. So we deal with noise and we deal with silence. And the reality of noise is people think about it as an acoustical issue, but it's not just an acoustical issue. It's a visual issue. It's a thermal issue. It could have to do with taste. It could have to do with pressure. So noise is more broadly defined as unwanted levels of stimulus, and more so, even more so, high levels of stimulus. So all of our work, whether we're consulting on buildings or whether we're consulting on products, is about bringing the level of stimulus down. Taking away glare and brightness and lighting, taking away noise and acoustics, taking away draft and thermal comfort. So we believe and know that high levels of stimulus cause people to be uncomfortable. And
Sure.
that low levels of stimulus cause people to be much more comfortable.
Makes sense that you guys would work with the autism spectrum and all that.
Absolutely. We have a strong specialty in cognitive and perceptual disabilities. Nowadays, that population is more broadly defined as invisible disabilities. So everything from autism to dementia to sensory processing disorder to blindness, deafness, PTSD, mental illness. When you think of all these populations, they're absolutely considered to be more sensitive on a perceptual and cognitive level.
Sure.
It also accounts for about half of us, if not more. So we've said for a long time, let's design for the 50+% of us that are living with more sensitivities. And for everyone else that perhaps doesn't require them, they're going to love the idea of a more peaceful building as well. They're going to love the idea of a product that's designed to be, more intuitive to the user as well.
Yeah.
So when you design for more sensitive groups, the other people benefit.
Then everybody benefits.
Everyone loves the idea of peace,
Yeah, there you go.
even if it's unconscious,
Sure.
So this building, though, we've been in here since 1990. And we purchased it because my grandfather was in kudos with the owners of Sound 80. He actually did a lot of the original lighting for the building and some of the acoustics as well. So these suspended can lights, for example, are all original. He did, and they became good friends. And when they closed up shop in 1985, due to a variety of reasons, Prince had made an offer on the building. And the owner's lawyers countered him, and he walked. And so this building sat vacant and unmaintained for 5 years, so from 1985 to 1990. And in 1990, my grandfather decided that he wanted to move his practice, which was already up and running as a consulting and research firm, but had no, it didn't have this much space to do research, to do experiential education, to do testing.
But he was in that field.
He was in that field, absolutely. So he started in about 1971.
Cool, and that was with the University of Chicago?
The anechoic chamber came from Chicago.
Okay.
But he was based here. Yeah, so he had an office on Bloomington.
Oh, cool.
But it was not this is a 15,000 square foot building. Originally it was 13,000. We added the acoustic lab, which brought it to 15. But it was not a space of this size. And he wanted to be in an environment where he could build an acoustic lab for testing, where he could build spaces to immerse people experientially in the work that we do, because it's extremely complicated to describe.
Yeah.
So, experiential education has always been something that we've believed is much more effective in our work in particular, but also overall. Sure. So he came in here in 1990, and he actually purchased it for half of what Prince offered. It was the bottom of the first recession. So we moved in and then started building the acoustic lab, which was going to accommodate the anechoic chamber and a suite of 3 reverberation chambers as well. And that construction wasn't completed until 1997.
Okay, so sound has to be the main kind of thing around here, even though you're blending all the senses?
I would say that sound is the dominant variable to the public. And to us, in the sense that we run an accredited acoustic lab, we have the anechoic chamber, which is globally recognized, and also because of the historic value of the space being a recording studio. So when many people think of Orfield, they think of silence, and they think of us as acoustic consultants. However, we're just as much working in the other areas as well. We're just as much working in lighting and thermal comfort and indoor air quality and so on and so forth.
Oh,
so
cool.
We're a multisensory lab, not just an acoustic consulting lab.
Okay, cool. Yeah. It's kind of rare for a business not to have a specialty to be that broad.
Yeah, well, the beautiful thing about human perception is everything's game.
Yeah.
So our work also goes beyond the architectural and product consulting. We do legal consulting. We do all sorts of things. So because human perception is the only reason why we know we're here, there's a lot that we can do to help people because of our background and specialty.
Beautiful, and that's why you got involved, right? Because you were originally kind of studying to be a psychologist or something like that, and then.
So I wasn't studying to become a psychologist. I have an extensive arts background.
Oh, cool.
I'm a photographer.
Beautiful.
And I was going into that professionally, and then I decided to pivot, and I decided to start studying cognitive and perceptual psychology and design out in New York.
On your own?
On my own, exactly. And I had spent some of my childhood here. I had spent some summers interning with my grandfather, and I was really focused on how the environment and how the practice was being perceived by the public. And so I was interested in how I could represent the building, represent what we would do visually through my background in the arts, linguistically through my own perspective and understanding. But it wasn't until I got to New York and I decided to pivot and study psychology, specifically cognitive and perceptual psychology and design, that I realized that what I was interested in, my grandfather had been doing for decades.
Sure. And you probably grew up with some of those ideas floating around, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, so much of what I've learned through him and through this work has been about the unconscious. And there's so much that we do, and so much that, so many decisions that we make in our lives that we do unconsciously. And that was a big piece of that. I had been in this building. I had been listening to him all of my life. But it wasn't until I got to New York and I started having these phone calls with him about what I was learning, about what did and didn't make sense, that it occurred to me that, perhaps I was meant to work with him. And he never asked me to be involved. He never asked any of my 4 younger siblings to be involved. My mother, his daughter, and her sister never got involved with the business. And so, to be honest, I kind of made it a declaration. I said, I'm going to come and I'm going to work with you. And he wasn't sure how it was going to work out, and either did I. But we have always been kindred spirits, and I have always trusted my intuition.
Sure.
And so I continue to follow it, today.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I've liked listening to his interviews and stuff. He's got a lot of interesting things to say.
He's extremely fascinating. He studied the philosophy of science at the University of Minnesota.
Philosophy of science.
And philosophy of science is about linguistics, meaning, language theory. It's essentially about how to think clearly. It's about solving problems. And philosophy, which I also studied, is an incredible field because it teaches you that a question doesn't imply an answer. It implies a curious look at the question and why it's being asked.
Sure, motivations.
Motivations, exactly. And so he was trained by Oxford, Oxford-trained philosophers at the time that were teaching at the U, and they tried to make a philosophy professor out of him. And he says he just didn't really have the patience for it.
Sure, the students.
Yeah, and he also realized, I think, he's extremely independent and extremely driven, and kind of self-identifies as somebody that he realized he was unemployable. He realized he needed to do his own thing. He realized he always wanted to remain a child. He realized he always wanted to explore different projects, different domains. And so I think part of getting interested in human perception was realizing that everything is game. You can work in any field, you can work on all these different issues. And he hasn't exactly said that himself, but I think he would agree with that statement.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so a lot of the other, things in this room or in this building in general are devices that we use to demonstrate what we do in our design work. This over here is an elderly viewing simulator. So we do a lot of work in dementia and aging in senior housing. And these goggles they actually represent common eye defects among elders. So some of them, they range from issues like diabetic retinopathy to central scotoma to tunnel vision.
Sure,
so,
my sister has Stargardt's.
Oh, she does,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, so these represent very common eye defects among the elderly. And we've studied elderly perception, we've studied dementia and Alzheimer's and aging extensively. And what we know is that dementia happens as a result of not being able to engage with life. And that's essentially what aging is. So as our ability to see gets worse, our probability of dementia goes up. As our ability to hear gets worse, our probability goes up. As our mobility gets worse, our probability of dementia goes up.
It's just not sensing.
Yeah, dementia is about losing your ability to be in the real world. And when we design for dementia, when architects and designers design for dementia, usually the instinct is to design spaces that are sort of exciting, that are going to wake you up because your senses have dulled. What we've found is if you design a space to be complex for a person that can't see, can't hear, and so on, can't move, they're not going to appreciate complexity or as art or as whatever it is. Well, it will just be something that they can't perceive clearly.
Sure.
So this demonstration is meant to show what happens when an elder walks into a senior home. So if a designer's choosing out a carpet material to use in their senior home, they're probably going to look at it under conditions like this. It's quite bright. Now, when it's placed in the senior home and it's in a dark corridor, the carpet's going to look like this.
Sure, some strange noise just came with that, huh?
Oh yeah, it's the light.
Okay.
And then we've got some glare.
Oh no.
So when you put on these different goggles, what happens is you're no longer as the elder living with diabetic retinopathy, for example, you're no longer appreciating this as a complex kind of artistic pattern. You're seeing it as blurry figures. And often what happens is an elder will think that they've dropped something. They'll mistake a pattern for something they've dropped.
Oh no, their glasses or something, sure.
In the process of picking the thing up that they've dropped that doesn't exist, they fall, they break a hip, and they've got 6 months to live.
Oh.
So we find, now this is not I'm not saying this to insult the design community at all.
No.
I'm simply saying it because we largely in the U.S. don't appreciate the impact of complexity, because complexity is often interpreted as being adjacent to art.
Sure.
Something
Or depth, yeah.
or depth, or contrast, or whatever it is. So,
sure.
But what we think is, if you're actually if you're designing for an elder, when we design senior homes, we design environments that are extremely simple. There's very little art. Everything is lighter in color. There's very little complexity. From a navigation and wayfinding perspective, things are where you'd think there would be. There's tons of daylight, and so residents don't need to be taking as much sleep medication because they're naturally producing melatonin and they're sleeping at night.
Beautiful.
So, there's all of these different things that support, the well-being of a person, that support a person's inability to perceive complexity, that then help them to act well, to feel well, to be well in their environment. So we've seen on several occasions for senior homes that we've designed, we've seen residents, after moving into a simpler environment, those that are not, sometimes not walking, that are wheelchair bound, we've seen them start to walk again. We've seen people
beautiful.
that don't eat start to eat again. We've seen people that are not as socially engaged start socially engaging. So to us, what that implies is, if people are already living in sensory deprivation, which you are when you're 80, 90, or 100 years old, you have to simplify an environment so that they can actually perceive what's around them. Now, once they're able to perceive what's around them more clearly, then they start to re-engage with life.
Beautiful.
And what is life but being able to see, hear, smell, taste, communicate, walk, be? Without those things, what's left?
Sure.
So this is just one demo, but there's a lot of demos all around the building that are meant to demonstrate issues that we feel are vital to the design field understanding.
Cool. Wow. Could I try to put the lens through one of these goggles quick?
Let's
Just see kind of what we're...
See if
that works. I don't know.
I don't know if it will.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, you got to be a little bit probably closer, but...
Okay, but it does a good job. Yeah. Like a diabetic would see.
Yeah, and when you wear them, so like this one is tunnel vision, for example. Yeah, there we go. Hopefully, let's see. So, you can see that.
Oh, yeah.
You're only...
Yeah, just that one small little, it's like a little window within your eyes or something.
Right, and the reality is when you're, I think as I said before, you're living with just a fraction of the perceptual capabilities you had when you were younger, when you're at that age. So these are meant to represent, visual eye defects quite well, but there's of course other modalities that could be represented as well.
Cool.
Yeah. And these are some other devices that measure other areas that we work in. These are multisensory meters.
Huh. And so like something like this, would that be a company that would hire you, Spabook or whatever, to help build machines like this? Or
So they wouldn't necessarily hire us. I don't believe that we've worked with them directly.
Sure.
But this is a device that we would use to measure an environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so just a tool for you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Who are your biggest...
Biggest clients?
Yeah.
I mean, it ranges significantly. So we've worked with a lot of the Fortune 500 companies. Harley-Davidson is a client of ours, Black & Decker, tons and tons of 3M, Medtronic. We've worked with the University of Minnesota locally. We helped do the acoustics for the Armory. We did all the acoustics for the Armory.
Cool.
We do broad building types, so we do everything from residential to commercial to medical environments. We've worked on essentially every type of building environment. But sometimes we're brought on and hired by the architects. Oftentimes that's because the architects want somebody on board that specializes in the perceptual issues to do with the users in the building.
Okay.
Or we can be hired by the owners, and then we'll be working alongside the architects. So it really just depends.
So the architects can kind of stick to their vision, but at the same time, make sure it's sensory cool for everybody else.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So we like to be very collaborative with whomever we're working with, and we feel that we're not architects and we're not interior designers. We're consultants, and so we advise in the areas. We do renderings, designs, all sorts of things across all the areas that we work in, but we